This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get free access to Nebula, the streaming platform built by all your favorite YouTubers, when you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below.
There is a shortage of skilled tradespeople throughout the U.S. economy.
The Department of Labor reported only 266,000 jobs were added in April, and the unemployment rate for the last month ticked up to 6.1%.
12 states have cut unemployment aid about 3 months before federal benefits expire in September.
At the very moment that unemployment is rising, fewer people are working, American businesses say they can't find employees. And it's obvious they can't. Go to the nearest strip mall and count the help wanted signs on the doors. They're everywhere.
If you've turned on the news within the last couple months, you've probably seen all sorts of dramatic coverage and special panels on the supposed labor shortage that has cropped up in the wake of the pandemic. Thanks to the COVID relief checks, tiny and inadequate as they were, for the first time in decades, many Americans found themselves with the tiniest bit of bargaining power against their boss. Suddenly, they could afford to stay home from their low-wage jobs, at least for a little while, and many took the opportunity to do so and look for better employment. This led to a wave of posters and signs outside places like McDonald's saying that no one wants to work anymore, as if it were some kind of moral failing that people were choosing not to slave away over a griddle 10 hours a day for poverty wages. But this new bit of tension between workers and employers is just the tip of the iceberg. In this episode, we're going to explore the possibility that the United States is witnessing the birth of a new labor movement. Okay, time for a pop quiz. I'm going to give you a quote, and you try to guess who said it. Here it is. Labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor, and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital, and deserves much the higher consideration. Who do you think made this assessment of labor and capital? If you've seen my other videos, you might assume this is a quote by Karl Marx, but you'd be wrong. This quote is actually by none other than President Abraham Lincoln from his 1861 State of the Union address. Lincoln was a contemporary of Marx, and there is some evidence to suggest that the two may have even corresponded at some point. But regardless, the fact that a president of the United States, a place we today consider the bastion of free market capitalism, would make a statement so supportive of labor over capital is probably shocking to many of you. Believe it or not, the United States did not always have the exploitative, soul-crushing labor landscape we see today. There was a time, many years ago now, when workers had actual bargaining power, where they could come together and say to their boss, "Hey, we've got some demands," and the boss would have to work with them. Today, that kind of relationship is nearly unthinkable. The barest hint of unionization in the workplace is often grounds for termination. Benefits our grandparents took for granted have been stripped away. Pensions, vacation time, paid sick days, maternity leave, a company car, a fair wage, all relics of a bygone era, consumed by the all-devouring ideology of cost-cutting and maximizing profit. Of course, executives never feel the sting of these measures. In fact, their compensation has only continued to grow, to the point where wealth inequality is now just as bad as its peak during the Gilded Age. These days, many workers never even meet their boss. They're not even considered employees. The gig economy has drastically changed the way we look at work. And as of the latest available data, 36% of American workers have turned to gig work to make ends meet. Combine the lack of livable wages, increasing rates of depression, lower life expectancy, and rock-bottom job satisfaction rates with a global pandemic, and you've got the perfect storm for a renaissance of class consciousness and labor activity. While it may not seem like much to the untrained eye, over the past year, we have seen workers taking the very first steps towards fighting for better conditions. One of the most important developments has been the resurgence of the labor strike in various industries as a tool for forcing change. For example, in 2020, during the pandemic, we saw strikes among nurses, teachers, flight attendants, and auto workers, to name just a few. In each of these instances, the workers, typically unionized ones, formulated demands that would provide them with better safety measures and wage protection for the duration of the pandemic. Nurses' unions picketed for adequate PPE and better staffing to handle the massive influx of coronavirus patients. Teachers demanded that schools remained closed until reasonable safety precautions could be implemented to protect themselves and their students from contracting the disease and taking it home to their families. Auto workers forced the shutdown of plants over social distancing concerns. Flight attendants negotiated for paycheck protection to be a part of the industry bailout, ensuring their economic security through the turbulent pandemic. In a time when millions of Americans were being laid off from work, many from jobs that would not survive the pandemic, union workers enjoyed a certain level of protection thanks to their bargaining power. And as such, they were laid off at a lower rate and often with job or paycheck guarantees. This hasn't gone unnoticed. After decades of decline in union membership thanks to vicious union-busting campaigns and expansion of corporate power, in 2020, membership began to tick up again. 2019 marked an all-time low for union membership, with an abysmal 10.3% of workers being represented by a union. In the wake of the pandemic, that number has climbed just a bit to 10.8%. While this may not seem significant, it represents the sharpest increase in 40 years. And the fact that it's increasing at all after 4 decades of steep decline is very promising. This increase in membership corresponds with polling that indicates a majority of Americans see the decline of unions as a bad thing for workers, and it coincides with the proliferation of labor voices on social media. But we'll get to that in a minute. One important union action that's currently ongoing, as of writing the script at least, is the impressive strike by Alabama miners who, along with miners from several other states, traveled all the way to New York City as a group to protest their unfair treatment outside the BlackRock headquarters. BlackRock is the primary shareholder of Warrior Met Coal, which operates out of Brookwood, Alabama. Warrior Met miners have been on strike for over 4 months now, demanding a fair contract after saving the company from bankruptcy. Back in 2016, when Warrior Met was in danger of going under, miners accepted a $6 per hour pay cut to keep it afloat. Since that time, the company has extracted record profits from their operation, netting $309 million in 2019, while the CEO continues to pocket his $4 million salary. All of this is on the backs of the people who actually do the incredibly hazardous, backbreaking, unenviable work down in the mines. Of course, this well-deserved strike has garnered very little mainstream media attention. One thing that's very important to note is that class consciousness and solidarity, the practice of standing with your fellow workers, does not necessarily follow a cut-and-dry political divide. I'm sure there are plenty of fancy business people in New York looking down on the miners as a bunch of rednecks, not only their class enemy, but opposed to their preferred political team as well. While it may be true that many of these Alabama miners espouse right-wing politics in general, if you listen to their own words about the strike, you'll notice there's nothing even the most centrist Republican would support. The United Mine Workers Association president said, "We're in New York City because we're simply following the money and demanding that those who created that wealth, the miners, get their fair share of it." While Abraham Lincoln would certainly have agreed with that sentiment, modern politicians are opposed to it in every way. Both Democrats and Republicans have fought tooth and nail to destroy unions and make sure workers don't have any bargaining power, in order to keep their corporate donors happy and cutting them nice campaign checks. The only group in America that supports the striking workers in just about any instance, regardless of industry, is the socialists. What many people have historically seen as a left-right divide is understood by socialists as a capital-labor divide. The working class of the US is made up of people from all political backgrounds, and their class interests are the same, regardless of those political beliefs. It's no coincidence that membership in socialist groups like the DSA has been increasing in tandem with union membership. Flowery words from politicians don't mean much to striking workers, but actual material support from other workers does, and the socialists are always the first to lend a hand, specifically because of their understanding of class struggle. The DSA is the largest organized socialist group in the US, currently sitting just shy of 100,000 dues-paying members. And since the pandemic, that number has jumped from 66,000 to its current 92,000. That is a massive increase in a very short period of time. It just goes to show that when all politicians have to offer is empty promises and an increasingly miserable capitalist status quo, building an economic alternative starts to sound pretty appealing. It's no wonder that polling continues to show a decline in favorability for capitalism and an increase for socialism. Politicians and the ultra-wealthy seem to be doing their very best to turn the rest of us against them. For example, Amazon has been at the center of worker rights discourse for a while now. And instead of laying low, Jeff Bezos decides to go on a little joyride to space, while his workers literally die on the job. Public perception has turned decidedly against the ultra-wealthy, and for good reason. The only way they're able to amass their vast fortunes is through the exploitation of their workers, and the problem continues to get worse. Right now, there's still very little awareness of the nature of class struggle, the battle between capital and labor, among the American people. Those in power understand it. That's why unions have been all but destroyed since the Reagan years. The accumulation of ever greater profits requires greater and greater extraction from the laboring masses. Without a banner to organize behind, the American working class lacks the cohesion it needs to make effective changes on a national scale. In the past, it was socialist labor leaders like Eugene Debs who offered a path forward. And thanks to the bold actions of workers back then, we have many things we take for granted today. Child labor laws, the weekend, the 8-hour workday and 40-hour workweek, workplace safety laws, and so much more. All of these were socialist initiatives supported by millions of hardworking Americans with an understanding of class struggle. The most critical thing we can do right now is work towards rebuilding that lost class consciousness. It will be a challenge, but we have more tools at our disposal than ever before. Social media has proven an effective tool for raising awareness and coordinating labor actions. And as the younger generations who grew up with the internet become more politically active, we'll likely see social media play an even larger role in organizing and agitating for positive change. The DSA isn't perfect, but it is a good first step for getting involved and learning how to organize within your community. See if there's a local chapter, or if there's not, reach out to the national branch and start one yourself. If you've done the reading, if you have a good understanding of the mechanics of class struggle, talk to your friends about it. Each one teach one, as the expression goes. Every little bit helps, and we need all the help we can get. A new labor movement, one that can really force concessions from the ruling class, would drastically improve the lives of average Americans. It could afford us financial security. It could give us time to spend with our friends and loved ones. And maybe, if we're lucky, it could even make America the country it claims to be. A country that works for everyone, not just those with money and power. The labor market is constantly changing, finding new ways to extract value from human energy. If we can organize for better conditions now, the future of work might not be as terrible as the present. If you'd like to get a glimpse of what that could look like, I highly recommend you check out Work of the Future on CuriosityStream. It's a hopeful look at what kinds of meaningful, stimulating jobs could replace our miserable current ones in the coming decades. CuriosityStream is an established streaming platform with a solid track record of caring about great educational content and the financial security of those who produce it. They've got thousands of nonfiction titles from some of the best filmmakers in the game. As you probably know, YouTube doesn't treat its creators very well. That's why some of my YouTuber friends and I teamed up to build Nebula, so we don't have to worry about demonetization. As educational creators ourselves, we love CuriosityStream, so we've worked out a deal, where if you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below, you'll also get access to Nebula, 100% free. That's less than $15 a year for both CuriosityStream and Nebula, which, in my humble opinion, is a pretty great deal. Since you're already on the internet watching my video, why not spend some time learning about fascinating topics on CuriosityStream? Or check out Nebula's original content, including my upcoming series on the resurgence of fascism. You can also watch all my videos as they were intended, ad-free. There really is something for everyone, and by signing up at the link below, you're helping us produce more content without the fear of demonetization. Give CuriosityStream a shot, and get free access to Nebula when you sign up using the link below. It really does help support my channel and educational creators all across YouTube. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, consider subscribing to stay up to date with my latest episodes. If you hated it, go ahead and drop a thumbs down. You can check out my previous episodes by clicking the links on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.